Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, we're going to talk about The Verge being a real bunch of Cheryls, we're going to talk about Deadmau5 deleting his Twitch channel, Amazon pulling out, and a whole lot more, so go ahead and stick around. Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to episode 156 of the BSP. My name is Bandrew. This is what I says. Like always, down below there are timestamps of everything that I talk about, so you can skip around and save a couple of minutes. But if you got the time, I would downright appreciate you if you would check out the entire episode. And if you want a different version of the show, you can find that at bandrewsays.com. Let's start with The Verge being a whole bunch of Cheryls, i.e. The Verge being real stupid. So, last week, The Verge released an article titled, "YouTube's Copyright Strikes Have Become a Tool for Extortion." Now, a little backstory on that is that two YouTubers received multiple copyright strikes and were threatened with a third, and the person who issued these copyright strikes was a scammer who said he would reverse the strikes in return for payment to a Bitcoin wallet, essentially holding these people's channels hostage because if you get 3 copyright strikes within a 3-month period, your channel disappears. They delete it, you are no longer allowed to be a YouTuber. So there are some very serious consequences for somebody submitting 3 copyright strikes against your channel and getting them through to take down your videos. That's all good for The Verge to bring to light. That is a very serious issue. But in that same article, the portion that I found most interesting is where they say copyright strikes can be used to suppress negative news. Some companies have served comedians with copyright strikes in an attempt to stifle any videos mocking their brand. And that's really all that happened at the beginning of the week. They made this article that actually seems to be pretty good and fighting for YouTubers' rights because all of those things that they discuss in that article, which I will link below, are bad. Not good things for YouTubers to have to go through. But let's jump back a few months. The Verge released a video on how to build a PC, and it was very poorly received because it was apparently very, very incorrect, and if somebody who is just starting out were to follow those directions, they would risk damaging their hardware. Now, I am saying apparently because I am a dope and I know absolutely nothing about building PC, so I am taking the community's word for it, and based on the amount of backlash that The Verge received, I can't imagine that it was a targeted harassment campaign. I would imagine that it was just actually wrong. That's why they got so much hatred. And because of the amount of backlash that they received, The Verge went ahead and decided, we don't want this on our channel, let's go ahead and take it down. So they took it down. Well, there were a few tech YouTube channels out there that made videos pointing out how wrong the PC build was and criticizing them. And that's where this story gets interesting. The Verge left those videos up, they didn't do anything with them for 5 months. But this last week, after they released that article that I discussed at the beginning, they went ahead and issued copyright strikes on multiple of these videos, getting them taken down and putting a copyright strike violation on these channels. Not a very good move, The Verge. And being that these were commentary videos or rebuttals or criticisms or parodies of The Verge's initial video, my poor understanding of copyright law, I should say, is that these would fall under fair use. They were a transformative work, they were criticism, or they were a parody. So copyright striking these videos certainly seems to be motivated by The Verge, as they said themselves, attempting to suppress negative news or attempting to stifle any videos mocking their brand. I can't imagine that they didn't see this coming. They just wrote an article about it. How dumb do you have to be? So, when this came to light, the YouTube channels that got striked made videos on it. It got spread around Twitter. It got covered by every single tech news channel out there. I'm probably one of the last ones talking about it. But Nilay Patel, the editor-in-chief of The Verge, came out with a statement, and he said, "I want to address a situation around some YouTube copyright strikes, since retracted, issued by The Verge and Vox Media, that has gotten pretty toxic and could have been avoided if the parties involved had simply reached out to me directly. And I just want to briefly interject here and point out how silly it is that he says, I really wish they would have just contacted me directly. All of this would have been avoided. Maybe that is true. It probably would have been a better course of action to contact you directly. However, I am glad that they did not, because this allows the entire community to see how you are acting poorly. They can see your bad behavior and say, oh, you know what? Vox Media and The Verge are being very hypocritical here. And on top of that, maybe people don't know who you are. Who's to say that all tech YouTubers know that Nilay Patel is the editor-in-chief of The Verge, who is owned by Vox Media? If I were to receive a copyright strike from Vox Media, I would not directly think, you know who I need to contact? Nilay Patel. That is a little bit silly to say. But I will go ahead and link the entire response that he posted in the show notes. And Nilay goes on, or Nilay, I can never remember how to pronounce it. He goes on to say that the videos were not fair use, but even so, he didn't feel right about the strikes and he retracted them. And he also says that The Verge's YouTube comments have been very negative and included death threats with an included screenshot that says, good luck staying alive. The internet doesn't forget. Now, on the note of death threats, I will jump in here and point out that those are stupid. You should not be sending them, especially over something as petty as making bad content or making some mistakes in terms of abusing the copyright system. That is not a reason to send somebody a death threat. However, I don't think that that comment there is actually a death threat. I think that is The Verge playing the victim. The way that I read that comment is somebody saying that your company is going down the crapper, and the internet will remember that you released a terrible, terrible PC build quality, and now you are trying to silence people who criticize you by abusing the broken YouTube copyright system, which you pointed out just a couple of days earlier is broken. I think that is exactly what the comment is saying. And to wrap up this story, there is a YouTuber who goes by the name of John Pilsner, the host of Front Page Tech. He is stating that The Verge's retraction emails were actually sent after YouTube had manually reviewed the copyright strike claims and determined them to be illegitimate, and therefore they were reversed. It was not Nilay Patel's request for the retraction that actually led to these copyright strikes being removed. It was YouTube reviewing them and determining these are false copyright claims, let's remove them. I cannot go so far as to say that is 100% true. There are some screenshots that John shows in his video. I will go ahead and link that in the show notes if I remember, but that is really where the story ends here. The Verge talked about using copyright strikes for extortion or abusing the system to silence people who criticize them, and then less than a week later, they do exactly what they outlined in their article. A little bit silly, in my opinion. The moral of the story of this entire thing is if you're a creator, do not misuse the copyright strike tool. I have had people suggest that I copyright strike videos that used some of my content that were hypercritical of me or that were trolling me or any number of things. I refused to go down that road because it was fair use. I understand it was a transformative work, it was criticism, it was parody. There is no justifiable reason for me to copyright strike that video, regardless of how much I dislike it. I think that is a very important thing to do, because the moment you go down the road of abusing the YouTube copyright system for your own benefit, to try to silence smaller creators, to try to silence any kind of criticism of you, you will become a pariah in the YouTube creator community, because most YouTube content creators have gone through issues where people abuse the copyright system to get one of their videos taken down. You don't want to be one of those people, so don't do it. The Verge, shame on you. Shame on you, The Verge. That's the end of that story. Now let's get to a kind of fun story. A Chuck E. Cheese conspiracy. You know what? Let's go ahead and go to the conspiracy corner. It's been a long time. Welcome to the Conspiracy Corner. This is not my own conspiracy, and it's not really a conspiracy that we're going to go into depth with, but I want to share this story about Shane Dawson. So Shane Dawson recently released a two-part conspiracy series And in part 2, he had an entire portion that focused on a conspiracy regarding Chuck E. Cheese pizza and allegedly them making pizzas out of uneaten pizza that is left on people's tables. That is the entire conspiracy. Seems a little bit silly, but that is what they focused on. This stems from a photo of a pizza being mismatched and not an actual circle. So there are some pieces that are longer than others. It doesn't seem like it's a single pizza. It seems like a bunch of mismatched slices thrown on a tray, run through the oven again with a little bit of added cheese thrown on top, and then served. Now, the thing that's interesting is that this series came out right after YouTube said, we're going to be fighting conspiracies on YouTube. And in episode 154 of the BSP, I discussed how YouTube described this as flat earth videos, 9/11 conspiracy videos, or videos misrepresenting history. And this raises the question of why YouTube has not taken a firmer stance against Shane's series. Is it because he's not directly targeting people, or that his conspiracies will not lead to the harm of people? But it could honestly have a very negative impact on Chuck E. Cheese. So does that mean that we can have potentially harmful conspiracies about companies all that we want? But the moment that those conspiracies can have a negative impact on an individual, that's when they cross the line? I honestly don't know. I just wanted to share this with you because I find it hilarious that the biggest conspiracy theory to come out recently, especially out of Shane Dawson's series, is something as goofy as mismatched pizza slices from Chuck E. Cheese. And also, this release was so poorly timed by Shane, it came out right after YouTube announced, we're gonna stomp out conspiracies. And YouTube doesn't seem to have done that. So it seems like there may be some double standards going on here, and YouTube should definitely come out and provide a statement on this entire situation. And Chuck E. Cheese, you got a lot of answering to do there, pals. Let's get out of the conspiracy corner. That is it. All right, now we got some Twitch news, and it would be that Deadmau5 deleted his Twitch channel. There's going to be a lot of reading in here, so I apologize ahead of time. Joel Zimmerman, you don't know who that is? That is Deadmau5. He deleted his Twitch channel after he was suspended. What happened? While he was playing PUBG, he called someone an effing, sea-sucking, stream-sniping bundle of sticks. I think you know what he actually said. Just replace bundle of sticks with another word for that term. You know what he said. And Joel released a statement on Reddit right after this happened, and he said, I am not going to stand for Twitch's double standard when it comes to censoring and suspending me for harmless-ish. While what I said was generally toxic as F, and not an ideology I hold closely to my moral standing by an effing long shot, it was some bottom-feeding piece of S from Colorado who decided to make it news, proving once again the online clickbait world is a piece of effing S on a good day. I just gotta point out here, this is really hard to read without actually swearing, but going on. While it was intended to insult an effing A-hat who was being an effing A-hat, it wasn't directed at an entire group of people who have a sexual orientation that differs from my own. F off with that S. I know who I am, and I don't have to effing sit here and cry and defend myself with the obligatory I am not that person, I am sorry reflex. Now, this post that he put out there was deleted, and he released another statement a couple of days later, and he said, I needed a little downtime there for a few and seriously reflect on all of this. I know what I said was wrong, and my hastily composed non-apology was an insult to injury. I realized that trying to somewhat dismiss it as gamer culture was even worse. I don't know why I did that, but I do know it was stupid and insensitive, and I feel even more ashamed. That was my worst moment. As for Twitch, they had every right to ban me for that. It was clearly in violation of their terms. Even if it wasn't, it was all around an incredibly irresponsible and insensitive thing to say nonetheless, especially for someone who has a reach. What I said was incredibly stupid, and I don't actually hold those beliefs at all. I let some gamer get the best of me, and in that moment, I completely lost control, and me lashing back with some knee-jerk post about how it may have seemed unjustified was completely unfair to Twitch and its viewers, so I apologize for that as well. With all of that being said, you may be thinking, why are you sharing this? This is just a bad story. This is just nonsense. There are a few reasons. Number one, I want to point out that live streaming is a dangerous game, especially if you are one of those edgelords, one of those I don't give an F, I'm going to say whatever I want type of people. It is a very dangerous game that could lead to some very serious backlash. It is seemingly very easy to get angry at someone that you're playing with and want to say some really mean stuff towards them without really thinking about the consequences or without realizing that thousands of people are watching you. So if you're edgy or you're an edgelord or you have a vocabulary that could get you into trouble, you may want to think extra careful about live streaming or at least about what you're saying in your live stream if you don't want to face backlash and risk this kind of attack. Secondly, I am just a little bit shocked at how angry people get and how invested they are in these online multiplayer games. And this is not meant to insult gamers. Gamers unite, gamers rise up. I'm not trying to insult you guys, but I simply don't understand how if a game makes you so angry and puts you in such a bad mindset that you're going to say some very hurtful things, why would you continue to play that individual game? I'll admit, in the past, I would play games that would make me insanely angry, and I would find myself furious, just screaming at my TV. You know what I did? I stopped playing them, because that is not a good thing to do. This is supposed to be an escape from real life. It's supposed to be entering this make-believe world. Why are you going to play a game that makes you more stressed out than your real life? It doesn't make any sense to me. No offense, gamers. As I said, gamers rise up. Gamers unite, whatever. Not trying to insult you, so I just don't get it. Third, you don't own the distribution platform. This is the most important one, in my opinion. Let me explain what I mean there. You may have gained a huge audience on whatever platform you have, whether it be YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, any of these things, doesn't matter. But it's best to remember that every single service or platform that you're on has terms of service, and you have to abide by those terms of service, or they have the full right to revoke your access. See Alex Jones. He's been completely deplatformed because these companies state he wasn't following their terms of service. And this doesn't go just for Twitch and YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. It can also go for web hosts. So if you want to completely get away from the possibility of being banned for violating a terms of service, I do imagine the only way to do that would be to own your own server, own all the hardware, and then buy your domain from, I don't know, somebody who doesn't have terms of service. I don't know if domain hosts could say we won't let you buy a domain because you violated terms of service. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I do imagine you would need to have your own server, host all of your own content, have your own video distribution, your podcast distribution, do everything yourself if you don't want to have to abide by other people's terms of service and risk losing everything. So to summarize here, be careful if you're live streaming. Don't be an edgelord because that can backfire very quickly, especially with the current climate where everybody wants to be able to write an article. Oh my God, this person has been exposed as a racist, homophobic bigot. He is the worst. She is the worst. Let's get him. Let's get him, boys and girls. Get him. Especially in today's climate. Be careful. Next, maybe don't play games that put you in a complete state of rage, especially if you're live streaming it. That is not a good mindset to be in, especially when you are rageful or full of rage. You don't really think through what you're doing. That could lead to some bad things happening. And lastly, if you don't own the platform that you're on, so unless you're Jack Dorsey or Susan Wojcicki, you need to abide by the terms of service. So read through them, make sure you're not violating them, make sure that you are not doing anything that would lead to the company that is hosting your content getting backlash, saying, I can't believe that you're hosting Bandrew's videos here. You should take him down or we're going to boycott your company. So just be careful. That's it. Next story. Amazon pulls out of New York HQ2. Get your damn mind out of the gutter, you pervert. Get your mind out of the gutter. Okay, Amazon gave a statement about this entire thing, and this is another story that is going to contain a lot of reading. I apologize. But Amazon pulled out of New York City HQ2, and they said, After much thought and deliberation, we've decided not to move forward with our plans to build a headquarters for Amazon in Long Island City, Queens. For Amazon, the commitment to build a new headquarters requires positive, collaborative relationships with state and local elected officials who will be supportive over the long term. While polls show that 70% of New Yorkers support our plans and investment, a number of state and local politicians have made it clear that they oppose our presence and will not work with us to build the type of relationships that are required to go forward with the project we and many others envisioned in Long Island City. And in that same article, according to TechCrunch, the pushback came from concerns regarding the city's infrastructure, the city's strained housing that already exists, and the fact that the location that Amazon HQ2 was going to be built on had already been set aside for schools, affordable housing, parks, and smaller commercial space. Now, we're not done. A city council member by the name of Corey Johnson came out with a statement, and he said, "I look forward to working with companies that understand that if you're willing to engage with New Yorkers and work through challenging issues, New York City is the world's best place to do business." That was my best politician voice. He goes on, "I hope this is the start of a conversation about vulture capitalism and where our tax dollars are best spent. I know I'd choose mass transit over helipads any day." Interesting response there, politician man. If I am not mistaken, he is referring to the $1.7 billion in grants and $1.3 billion in tax breaks offered to Amazon to draw them to New York City. And Amazon did, in turn, offer to or pledge to invest $5 billion in New York City and Virginia headquarters, as well as bring in an estimated 25,000 new jobs over the following decade. And it was also estimated that the move would lead to a $27.5 billion revenue boost for the state and city over the next 25 years. So based on those things, it does sound like losing this deal will lead to a negative impact on tax revenue forecasts for New York. That kind of goes against what the politician said. We want to spend our tax dollars elsewhere. Well, now you're not going to be getting those tax dollars. Sure, you don't lose that $1.7 billion grant money, but you also don't get all the other taxes from Amazon, or those new jobs, or the constant influx of money into your local economy. So strictly from a financial perspective, it seems like the city will now have less tax dollars to spend how they want on mass transit instead of helipads. Now, at the same time, whenever a city does rely on a single company for its viability, it doesn't seem to end well. And I am basing that off of no real information other than seeing films where there are a lot of derelict cities that used to be mining towns, or there was a single manufacturing plant. Maybe I should refer to, Michigan, Detroit, where an entire industry kind of just dried up and that city has gone downhill, and it is a very poor city now because that industry is no longer as profitable as it once was. So maybe by diversifying their tax income, even if it is a lower number, it will be better for the economy in the long term. See, I am not a city planner. I am not a governmental tax consultant or forecaster or anything like that. I am out of my wheelhouse, even though I am somewhat of a finance guy. I am just not 100% sure on this story, so I would love to hear from you. Do you think Amazon made the right decision on pulling out because they weren't going to get the support that they want from local government? Or do you think they did something shady? Do you think this is good for the city or bad for the city? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will link a few articles about this in the show notes down below. That wraps up the news. We had some long stories and a lot of reading today. Let's jump to what you had to say to get some more reading going. And the first comment comes from American Liberty, and he says, "I can't believe that I am going to say this, but maybe the thumbs up and thumbs down should only be allowed to be pushed by verified users, verified by the same process they used before they let a channel use the live stream feature. When a non-verified user clicks on one of the icons, they can receive a message. This feature is for use by verified channel accounts. Would you like to give a private thumbs up to this creator, unshackle my YouTube channel and become verified, or join the YouTube creative community, create my personal YouTube channel and become verified? American Liberty, I actually really like this idea, and I think it would be very good at decreasing spam accounts and decreasing bot accounts, because if I'm not mistaken, to verify, it's been a while since I've done this, but in order to verify your account, I believe you need to have an actual phone number. And unfortunately, you're not able to use any of those VoIP phone numbers or one of those burner phone numbers that you get through a burner app like, I can't think of any off the top of my head. And initially, I was going to push back and say, well, you know what? This could cause some issues with anonymity and tracking, because now Google is requesting that if you want to interact on their platform, we need your phone number so we can track your behavior. And then if a government wants that, we would have to hand it over. That was my initial thought. And you know what? Google tracking you more, also not the best thing, but they're going to track us no matter what anyways. Then I thought about it a little bit more. YouTube, completely free service. And you could still get benefit out of it if you want. You're just not going to get the full benefit out of being able to interact. You just couldn't share your thumbs up or thumbs down without providing a little bit of added information. And I don't think that you could comment unless you have a YouTube channel. I don't know. Somebody let me know. If you aren't a verified account or if you don't have a YouTube channel, are you still able to comment on other YouTube videos? I can't recall. Anyways, good comment, good ideas. I think that may actually work. Good idea, American Liberty, even though that is scary. Give Google more information. Next comment comes from Gut Punch News. He says, Bandrew, these DNA companies state in their end user license agreement that they own your DNA profile after 3 years. You sign your rights away. And Ted Kaczynski said technology would be the death of humanity, paraphrasing. Read his manifesto. Nailed it. Gut Punch News, thank you very much for the comment. I will start by saying I have not yet read Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. Not sure if I'm going to, but I have heard multiple people say he got it completely right about the whole, is it techno state? Is that what he called it? I don't know. Maybe I'll read it in the future. One thing that I did read, though, was portions of 23andMe's, you like that transition? 23andMe's terms of service, and I did not see anything in their terms of service about them owning your DNA samples. Nothing in there that would imply that they own your DNA profile. I didn't see that. What I did see is them saying that they could disclose your information in order to comply with legal requests, but also, if you sign an additional research release form, they would de-identify your information and aggregate it into datasets for research purposes. So with that being said, I only read one company's terms of service, and I didn't see anything that stated they would own my DNA profile. Can you link me some that do? Because if that is a thing, I want to know about it and I would love to cover it. But based on this one sample that I took, I couldn't find it. Thank you very much for the comment, Gut Punch. Appreciate you. Next comment comes from Brian Casey. And he says, well, what a can of worms you've opened on the podcast front. First and foremost, the biggest problem podcasts have is discovery. Say I like the BSP in its audio form and want more podcasts in the same vein. How do I find those? Well, I can't do it on iTunes because iTunes doesn't tell me what a podcast is like and what topics they cover and how I might find another like BSP. They stick them in self-selected categories, and now it's regular business for new podcasts to list themselves in any category that even barely relates. So iTunes is and has always been useless for finding new podcasts. Now, there are a bunch of new services that list podcasts in various ways and let you search them in hopes of surfacing something you might want to listen to. And I'll pay you a nickel for every one you can name without having to search for it, because they have exactly the same problem as podcasts. You literally have to know they exist before you can search for them to find out if they exist. Podcasts and their specialist search engines cannot be discovered without already knowing they exist. The reasons for this are many, and lots of places exist that will examine those reasons. Far be it from me to step on their toes. The point is, yes, podcasts need a YouTube for podcasts, but is Spotify the sort of place that can do that? Can Spotify be YouTube for audio? Well, let me just look to see how good Spotify is at showing me new music I might like. Oh, well, podcasting is doomed. But seriously, whatever the YouTube of podcasting is going to be, someone is going to have to build it from scratch and then carefully curate it by hand rather than by algorithm. Because if I've learned one thing about recommendation algorithms from YouTube to Netflix to Spotify to Pandora to Goodreads to whatever else is out there, it is that they are universally terrible at actually showing me things I might be interested in or enjoy. Brian, thank you very much for that comment. That was quite a long one, but I read the entire thing and included it because I think you raised some interesting points. But of course, I am going to play the devil's advocate. So let's talk about bands and draw a parallel between the two. How did bands grow their fan base in the early 90s to mid 90s to late 90s to early 2000s? There was no recommendation algorithm or anything like that. It seems to be all word of mouth. That is how bands grew early on, going out on the street, flyering, doing the actual legwork rather than relying on some company to push their band and grow their audience. That's kind of where podcasting currently is. There is no algorithm saying, you need to check out BSP, you need to check out this podcast, and there's no companies pushing all of these shows. It is all word of mouth. It is all very strenuous and hard work and legwork. Getting out there, telling people about your show, and promotion, actually putting in the promotional work. Now, what about live shows? There were obviously going to be live shows where it would have an entire bill of bands, and that could be considered somewhat of a recommendation. You're going to see the headliner, and then you see 2 or 3 opening bands, and that acts as a recommendation. Oh, if you like Muse, you may also like, I don't know, some other band, Radiohead. Radiohead's opening for Muse now. This is a weird world I'm living in right now. But the parallel to podcasting here, I don't think that there's any direct comparison, but the parallel for podcasting would maybe be guest spots on other shows. You go on a larger show, and by them having you on, that is kind of them recommending your show to their existing audience. So there's a parallel there as well. And then we got music magazines. What about those? Music magazines would go ahead and have reviews of new CDs, have reviews of shows. It would tell you all sorts of information about these new and upcoming bands, these established bands, and you can buy that once a week or once a month and find out a bunch of new music. There really is no parallel for that within podcasting. So maybe there needs to be some kind of podcast magazine. It could be called Podcastage. Maybe I should do that. No, I'm not going to do that. That's too much work. But that's something that is lacking, where there's no authority really in helping people find new shows. I don't want it to be algorithm based. I agree. That's not always the best. I've had tremendous success with algorithm based discovery in terms of me finding stuff that I like. I'm not talking about me succeeding. I'm talking about YouTube being able to always recommend me another video that I cannot wait to click on. That is something that always leads me down a dark hole. But there really is no magazine parallel for podcast, and I think that would help. So with that being said, I don't know if podcasting actually has a discovery problem. All I can say is that it takes significantly more work to grow a podcast than it does a YouTube show, because YouTube does have the recommendation algorithm. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's good to have quite a while to practice and get better at podcasting, because if there's one thing that's true, most people who start a podcast think that they are perfect at podcasting and they are the best right from the start. And that is almost never the case, because podcasting is very similar to playing in bands. Like I said, most people think they're great when they start, but they only get good after a few years. And they would probably be horrified if their first episode was their most downloaded and one of the most listened to episodes, because most people's first episodes are trash. So I don't think that we really do have a discoverability problem. I think that we are just unfairly expecting the same kind of growth that you see on other places like YouTube. There is a main company above that has they get a direct benefit from leading you to find new videos. There is no direct entity benefiting from you finding another podcast. So there is going to be a little bit of a disconnect. No reason for a company to come in and start to recommend you or develop a way to recommend you new shows, because they don't get any monetary benefit currently. And I don't have the answer there. So that's my take on it. I think it's good that people have to work for it, because in working for it, you get better. Great comment. Appreciate you. Next comment comes from Poorly Reported. Getting botted being a different issue, I believe dislike mobs are important. Mundane Matt is still dislike mobbed to this day after violating YouTube's terms of service. This is an indicator of his bad behavior. There is a new VW ad that is mass disliked because people think it is feminist. It isn't. It is kind of a good ad. The mass downvote tells both VW and me that a hysteria has begun. Poorly reported, therein lies the issue with the entire dislike system or with any kind of interaction system. Dislike mobs can be useful and allow people to determine a channel has had or exhibited bad behavior in the past, but at the same time, it can be used by people who just decide to hate a video. Just create a dislike mob for the sake of being edgy or just because they dislike something. So that raises the question, if you cannot fix a tool to avoid abuse of that tool, do you want to eliminate the tool completely, or do you want to allow the abuse of the tool to continue so you can also have the benefits of the tool? Therein lies the problem, the predicament that YouTube is in. They need to solve this issue, but the tool also offers some really useful information. I don't have the answer again. I'm not getting paid millions of dollars from YouTube to figure it out either, so I'm not gonna waste a bunch of my time thinking about it. But I think there is a serious conflict of interest where you want to keep that system intact, but you also have people abusing it. How do you solve that? I don't know. And the last comment comes from Age of Boredom. He says, glad you're back this week, Bandrew. As someone who worked in a pretty high-profile startup and has freelanced at other companies that have been acquired, this is pretty much the aim of 99% of startups. To incentivize potential employees, you're given a whole bunch of share options that you can buy over years of service, which are worth nothing until the company goes public, which usually offsets a poorer salary and benefits. Not always, but frequent enough. This from the offset gives everyone the mindset of how can we get the company big enough to be noticed to attract A, new rounds of investment, all those investors want a piece of the pie, so you want to sell, and then B, a really large company to just buy you. It's why you have a load of startups specializing in weird geotagging or VR techs that will never make it to the consumer as they are so niche. The aim is to have Facebook, Google, whoever just buy you so they can own your patented tech and A, stop the opposition from having it, or B, integrate it into one of their existing techs. I don't think 90% of startups have been wanting to change the world for a long time. It's just business. Age of Boredom, thank you very much for sharing your personal experience in the tech industry. And I understand it is just business. I have no problem with it being just business. That is perfectly fine and perfectly viable. However, it is highly concerning to me. What I mean there is if companies are just starting to be acquired by one of the big three, Apple, Google, or Facebook, does that mean that we will never have a startup that is a direct competitor to those big three? Are we going to end up dying where those are the same big three? Nobody came in and challenged them because they just wanted to be acquired by them to get a really quick buyout, get a bunch of money, and go retire at 20, 30. I don't know when people retire. I don't know if it is this entrepreneurial spirit that keeps them going or not, but it is a little bit concerning because nobody's challenging them now. There are no direct competitors because people just start up to get acquired. And if you're just getting bought by these large companies or acquired by them, how do we have competition? We can't. We don't. I honestly just don't know, but that's it for this section. Thank you very much for the comment, Age of Boredom. Let's get to my favorite part of the show, the Ask Bandrew segment. Alrighty, welcome to the Ask Bandrew segment. If you got any questions, go ahead and send them to askbandrew@gmail.com, and I will likely answer them on an upcoming episode of the podcast. I also want to throw this out there. If you feel so obliged to send in an audio clip or a video clip asking your questions, feel free to do that. Save me some reading. It is painful for me. I am so bad at doing it. So if you feel obliged, go ahead and send in an audio clip, send in a video clip, and I'll include it. There you go. first email comes from Christian, and he asked a very long question, so I am not going to read the entire thing. I am going to summarize. He is asking for an interface recommendation with the following criteria: cheap, 2 microphone inputs, a stereo line input with no latency to capture external audio source like a phone, headphone out with a good quality output, relatively small form factor, and 48 volts of phantom power. There are 2 recommendations, and they are both going to be Behringer. First one, UMC 404 HD is $150, and it has 4 XLR combo jack inputs, 48 volts. It has a decent enough headphone output and headphone amp. Not the best, but it will get you by. It's going to work well. The way you would use this, plug in your microphones channel 1 and 2, and then you would need a stereo 3.5 millimeter to dual mono 1/4 inch jacks, and you would plug those into combo jacks 3 and 4, and that would function as your line input. It does have a line or instrument input switch on the channel, so you could do that. And that's $150 now, which is insane. It's gone up $50 in the last 6 months. Then the other option is a mixer. Oh, I should point out the UMC 404 HD will allow you to record each individual track separately in your DAW. So if you want to do that, that's the route to go. But the mixer, Behringer Q802 USB is $90. It has the 2 XLR inputs, so you'll be fine there. And then in order to connect your external device, you would need a stereo 3.5 millimeter to dual mono 1/4 inch. That's not right, to a stereo 3.5 millimeter RCA cable to connect that to the 2-track input. And the thing with this mixer, it will down mix everything to a single stereo track. So if you're okay with that, that will likely give you a better option. I believe they both have 60 decibels of gain. The Behringer Q802 has Xenix preamps. The UMC 404 HD has Midas preamps. And did I say that right? Midas? Yeah, Midas versus Xenix. And I did a comparison. I heard almost no difference. So I think you'll be fine with either of them. Behringer just makes fairly useful stuff for pretty cheap, and as long as you're not running super hard to power headphones with high impedance, like some 600 ohm beasts of headphones, I think you'll likely be fine with them. And he also asked, do cheap metal pop filters usually do anything? I have not tested any cheap knockoff metal pop filters from the Stedman ProScreen 101. I think I actually bought one. I'll have to check. But I haven't tested any, so I cannot say for certain if they do. But good email. Hope that helped. Next email comes from Braden, and he says, I need help to figure out how to change to line 1 16-bit on Behringer, Euphoria UM2 on Windows. I need to know ASAP. And this came in December 29th, 2018. So, first off, let me just point this out. If you want an immediate response, don't send me an email. I'm not gonna, I would love to have the time and the money and the ability to respond to everybody's tech requests. I simply am unable to do so based on the number of emails that I get, based on the number of comments I get on YouTube. I am not able to do that. So I exploit you on the podcast for content. So thank you for that, but you are not going to get a quick response. And by saying, send it to me ASAP, that always leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Okay, so I am assuming you are asking, how do I set my interface to 1 channel 16-bit? I believe I demonstrated that on the Mac, and you were able to do that with some interfaces. I'll start by saying, I don't think that's an option in Windows. I don't think you can do that. I'm assuming you are recording a stereo track on Windows, and that is leading to your audio coming out of the left-hand side of your speaker. That's easily solved. I've made an entire video on this, and first, what you would need to do is set your recording software or streaming software to mono. Very easy to do. Check the video, I will link it if I remember to do so. Or search, fix audio coming out of left speaker, don't know how to fix it. Search that in Google or YouTube. My video may show up. OBS does have a function, say down mix microphone to mono. Your DAW will also have an option to create a mono track. You want to do that and select input 1 as the input for that track. And Discord, your VoIP service, down mixes everything to a mono track, so you'll be fine there as well. Hope that helped. I don't use Windows. I don't know. Next email comes from Jeff, and he says, hey there. First, thanks for all your great videos. They've helped me tremendously. We podcast at Monday Morning Quarterbacks and use 2 Rode NT1As with a Mackie Pro FX 12V2, but I have a Rodecaster being delivered Wednesday. However, I do a little media work on the side for some folks, and that includes a podcast. So here's my issue. We want to have calls patched in on that second podcast, solved via the Rodecaster Pro, but we usually have me and at least 2, if not 3 others sitting in the room when we record. I have a good room I use that works with condensers. My dilemma is that I need 2 more mics now. Thinking I may want to eventually have the capability of recordings at conferences or in louder areas, restaurants, etc., in a live environment, I was thinking of buying 2 Procasters to fill out my stable. First question, is it a bad idea to mix dynamics and condensers in the same podcast? I don't have the funds to own 4 condensers and 4 dynamics right now, so I have to make a choice. Would the show sound like crap if I used 2 NT1As and put the other 2 in studio guests on Procasters? Does the Rodecaster provide enough clean gain for the Procasters without the need for a cloud lifter? Second, would or could the Rode Broadcaster act as a bridge solution in providing that nice rich sound from a condenser, but also a solution usable in a loud environment? Jeff, thank you very much for the email and the question. They are very good questions. And host of the Monday Morning Podcasts, the Monday Morning Quarterbacks, I got Bill Burr on the brain. So to answer your first question, is it a bad idea to mix dynamics and condensers? I don't see why that would be any kind of issue whatsoever. I see no issues with that. I was talking to SoundSpeeds the other day, and he brought up an example that made perfect sense. I didn't think of it off the top of my head, but the, what's-his-face? The Howard Stern Show, TLM 103 and SM7B. They mix dynamic and condenser, and they have no issues. If you do have issues with any kind of bleed, look into something like Alphonic Multitrack, because that does allow you to auto-duck the channels that are not being spoken into and focus on the channel where the main audio source is being spoken into. I don't know if that made any sense. So no, I don't think it's bad to mix dynamics and condensers. I think that would work perfectly fine. You may have to do a little bit of EQ magic because those are 2 very different sounding microphones, but you should be able to get by. Second question, Rodecaster, does it have enough gain for the Procasters? Such a confusing naming scheme. Yes, it does have enough gain, not game, and it also has a good enough dynamic range that you can run those microphones so you're hitting negative 12 decibels and then boost everything and post without having any serious issues. And the third question, could the Rode Broadcaster act as a good bridge solution to provide rich sound but be usable in a loud environment? I don't know if I would be buying any condenser microphone unless it's specifically designed for use in loud environments like the Neumann handheld condensers. I don't think I would be buying a condenser for convention floor use or restaurant use or anything like that. Don't think I would be doing that, but that's my take on it. I'm a dope. I don't know. I personally would not be doing it though. I'm waiting for a response from a company to provide me some information on this topic area. Next email comes from Alan, aka SoundSpeeds, the host of the SoundSpeeds YouTube channel. SoundSpeeds, that's sound advice. He asks, Bandrew, what time is it? Thanks in advance, dude. Let me go ahead and check. It is 1/2 a hair, 1/4 to a freckle. I hate that so much. Whenever somebody says that, I want to punch them square in their face. But right now, it is 1 o'clock out here in California, and that is why my show comes out so late for you folks out there on the East Coast, in New York, or in the UK. I'm much earlier than you, and that's the problem. So there you go. Sorry I didn't have a funnier answer there for you. And the last email comes from some string of letters on their email. I don't know how to pronounce that. Owner. Okay, he says, question about Samson Meteorite. First of all, thanks for the good and clean reviews. I have little question and sorry for my English. In your Meteorite review, you put the microphone behind the keyboard and smashed. I smashed. I didn't smash the keyboard or the microphone. I did not smash it. Some people will get that. You put the mic behind the keyboard and smashed it, and he took all the sounds After that, you put the mic in front of you and didn't smash the keyboard, so I am simply asking, if you use the microphone in front of the keyboard, will it take the keyboard sound the same as if you put it behind the monitor? Good question, owner. No, it will not. It will not take the sound the same. Let me explain why. The Samson Meteorite is a cardioid microphone, meaning cardioid polar patterns have a dead spot or a null area at about 180 degrees, or exactly at 180 degrees, meaning it will pick up sound the least from that point. So if you have the microphone, I'm going to back my microphone up. This is going to be annoying for the podcast listeners. My C414 is behind the keyboard now, in front of my monitor. Hopefully you can still hear me. Let me jump to a part where I can type. You can hear that very loud because the keyboard is within the polar pattern. It's picking up sound from the front of the microphone. Now, let me go ahead and put the C414. I just hit something. Let me go back to, I'll go to cardioid. And now let me go ahead and do the same thing with the microphone in front of my mouth, but the keyboard in the dead area. Significantly quieter. That is because it is a cardioid polar pattern. So, to answer the question, which I could have answered in 5 seconds, yes, put the microphone in front of the keyboard so the keyboard is in the dead spot of the Samson Meteorite, and that will pick up significantly less noise. That was very long-winded, and I wasn't planning on doing a test, but I did. Sorry. That's going to wrap up this week's episode. I got no personal stuff to talk about. I've been playing around with NASs. What's the plural for NAS? Network attached storage devices. I don't know. Anyways, that's going to be it for this week. I got nothing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to help out, go ahead and share the show with somebody, a creator who may gain some benefit from the news analysis that I do. Also, if you want other amazing podcasts that are focused on geeky stuff, whether it be comic books, movie analysis, whether it be well-being, go ahead and check out geeksrising.com. That is the podcast network that this show belongs to. How awesome is that? I belong to a podcast network. It sounds more important than it is because it's my podcast network. Okay, I'm rambling now. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. Bye.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer of Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.